But what if not only do we want all of that to happen agentically, right? So that we can focus on maybe solving one important problem that we haven't been able to crack because I can focus on that, right? I have more insight. When these agents are working through massive data sets, it has a capacity that human beings just don't always, because we have to rejuvenate. We have to end the day. We have to go to sleep. We have to eat, right? We have to live. And the agents are going to not do all of that stuff, right? So they're going to get us to the answers faster.
We're going through something absolutely historic.
Technologies across the board are growing exponentially.
It's a disruption that's going to completely redefine the way businesses compete.
In the next decade, we're going to lose 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies.
The exponential growth of computing is continuing.
AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Whether you like it or not, that the future cannot be stopped by anyone.
Welcome back to the Future Tech and Foresight podcast. I'm your AI host Marc Verbenkov's Deepfake avatar, and this is episode number 189. Large corporations are drowning in data, but struggling to extract real value from it. In this episode, Marc talks with Suzanne-Moursi about the future of enterprise data management and the role of AI agents in making data more accessible, actionable, and efficient. Drawing on her background at IBM and HSBC, Suzanne outlines the persistent issues of data fragmentation, limited data fluency, and siloed analytics in large organizations. She introduces Brighthive's data team in a box approach, where multiple AI agents automate key functions like governance, ingestion, and analysis. Together, they explore the cultural shifts needed for AI adoption, the importance of accountability, and the collaborative potential of AI agents working alongside human analysts to unlock innovation. Suzanne EL-Moursi is the co-founder and AMP, CEO of Brighthive, an AI-powered data platform helping organizations unlock insight from complex, fragmented data. With over 20 years of experience leading digital transformation and growth strategies, she's worked with major brands like IBM, HSBC, GE Healthcare, and Sapient Nitro before turning her focus to startups. Suzanne has played leadership roles at Power2Switch, Choose Energy, and Mira Fitness, and holds advanced degrees in human-computer interaction and business from DePaul and the University of Chicago Booth School of Business.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Suzanne, for joining the podcast today. I am very much looking forward to talk about the agent that you're creating and all of the kind of interesting AI work that you're doing. I think it's going to be an interesting podcast. And yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on this Valentine's Eve. I've been already to 2 kids' birthday parties for my children. So happy Valentine's to whoever will be listening. Yeah.
Lovely. One of the ways that I like to start the podcast is getting a little bit of sense of not necessarily your entire journey, but like, was there a event or something that drew you into the work that you're doing?
Right. I'll focus it on why Brighthive. I think the larger conversation of, leaving 16 years of big corporate enterprise and becoming an entrepreneur 13 years ago is probably a topic for a whole other podcast. But for the opportunity at hand, which is really changing work to be data-informed work, that is the opportunity that I think your audience and yourself will find, at least for us, the conviction around it is solid, right? And it's legit. But it started really with the 16 years that I was in big corporate, GE Healthcare, IBM Global Services, HSBC, just big corporate brands that are risk averse, that have a history in the way that the systems were defined, right? The empires, the culture around it. And the thing about enterprise culture is there is so much sophistication and intricate detail in the workflows within every function, right? And when you join a place like GE, for example, it's a lot of things, right? In whichever division, whether it's the medical imaging, which is where I was at, or appliances, and it's never the same thing as you navigate the enterprise, because within each function and with each kind of teamwork, within each entity or node, as I call it in the enterprise, there's just so much rich data assets, and it stays locked. Okay. This is, if you think about this before kind of even internet here for a minute, right? We're talking about mainframe days. We're talking about where data actually lived. So we are 100% at a moment where now compound that rich culture of historic, details and workflows and richness and knowledge with where we have been and for the last 30 years since the mid 90s with the birth of the internet, right? And then the fact that in the last 3.5 decades, you are also generating data every second, right? Because of the devices that we're using, the technologies that we're adopting, marketing has become digital, sales has become digital, and really that has been something that I've carried with me. I'm a technologist all my life. Immigrated from Egypt to the United States, did my master's in computer science in the mid '90s. Started at Big Blue, IBM Global Services, a phenomenal place, literally in financial services before the Y2K, 5 years before the Y2K, and was working for Bank of America on data that was in mainframe, right? And to just look at where we are today, fast forward in 2025, right? This was 95, 2025, and the fact that we expect the possibilities of AI to change everything we've known, right? But it's artificial. It's artificial until it's not. So it needs clean data, right? It needs to be informed. How is that going to happen when much of where my career and all of us really, we struggle with data, right? If you ask somebody, how do you feel about your data? Do you work with your data? How data informed are you? There's a lot of studies, and I can provide them as well, where when you measure the data maturity within the enterprise, it consistently ranks low. It's below double digits. And so to me and my co-founder, how is it that we're exploring the moon and Mars and we're building EVs, but we're not able to be much more data informed, right? In any decision that we make as far as our daily jobs. Like imagine if all jobs descriptions were redefined to say that anyone before they kind of do their day-to-day work, write a strategy piece, make a change that is mission critical, can simply look at data first and find evidence to support that. But they can't because they're not, if they're in the marketing department, they're not data engineer. Or if they're in the procurement department or whatever function, we're talking customer success, supply chain, they have the assets, but they don't necessarily have the know-how, which is technical capabilities, technical tools around the modern data stack, right? And what ends up happening, and we see over and over in our customers' sites, is you have all the assets, you have a limited number of people, which are usually your central data analysis team, data engineering team. And they continue to be completely polar opposites. That's where Brighthive comes in, because the opportunity that we saw in the end of the day is that we were looking at the problem, I think, by we, as far as a business community, as far as leaders, as far as humanity, to say, you're just going to go get more, data engineers or invest more. But the reality is data engineers are hard to find. They're expensive. First of all, we don't crank them out as much, right? So even if you can hire for them, and of course, we've gone through cycles of cost reduction, right? When in the end, you look and see that the percentage of the workforce in a company that is just data services, data scientists, hovers around 3%. But the data load, right, that you have, which is to process the enterprise's data assets, is 100x that. And so you were looking at the problem completely different, which is where the opportunity is. And the idea is, what if we give every team in the enterprise across any function, whether it's as old and big and wide as GE or a smaller company that is medium size, a unicorn still, but modern day sizing now, you don't need as many people, 50 people, 100 people. But what if we made everybody in the company become data fluent by giving them a data team in a box, right? So we are here because we want to empower the data consumers, which are the people that live outside of these technical data fluent teams, and give them an end-to-end data team in a box is kind of our, marketing for it, but really a platform that has 7 agents that mimic the specialization of data teams, because machine learning is different than a data scientist, different than a data analyst, different from a data engineer. And the orchestration layer that gets 7 agents to work as if you had a central data team in whatever company supporting the business units as they are trying to unlock insights from their data assets. So that is the point of it, is as we were seeing the last really decade, artificial intelligence isn't just since November 2022. it has been evolving, but out of sight from the public's view and the business community as a whole. It has been going on, and Brighthive started in 2018. So we have been betting on the idea that artificial intelligence will be at a point where the reasoning is mathematically infinite, that you can get these agents, right, to learn specific tasks and perform specific, just questions or modeling that you want just as good as a human being, if not better, right? A stroke of luck for us is 2022, right? That this became in your iPhone, and then you start looking at it as just someone, my neighbor. And then in 23, some people started dabbling with experiments. And then in 24, before they even called it the year of the agents, everybody was intrigued by it. So that's kind of, I would say, the last since 18, so the 5 or so years for us. It's 5 or 6 years, and it's really great to see that there's at least intrigue. There's still a lot of educating the market to capture it, but and technically we can solve this problem. That's the other
Right.
part.
Okay. Okay. Really interesting. A lot to go on here. I want to maybe go back a little bit. So you mentioned, working in all these large companies. For my career, and I think a number of the audience members that I've interacted with, like for me personally, I have only ever worked in either startups or small businesses. So I've worked obviously with large companies and like with teams of large companies. But one of the questions that I had for you, which I think might help us later on in the discussion, is as the importance of data has grown over the last, say, 20 years or so, and especially when you were working in these companies, were you finding, I don't know the right word, like hesitancy or opposition or objections to, well, it's just data, we don't need it? Or like, are people in these organizations realizing how beneficial it is? And was that, if they do realize that now, did that take a long time? Like, was there a lot of opposition to that?
Yeah. So I would summarize it to be it was an opposition. It was frustration because before BI, just think about it, they have all of that, all these assets. They know they've been collecting data, whether it's, off of imaging scanners for GE Healthcare in the hospital. And they know that there's data on the machine. And I remember specifically in 2009 when I was at GE, the goal was how do we monetize the data that comes off of the MRI scanners and the PET scanners? Because when you deploy one of those to a Mayo Clinic, they won't, change it for another 25 years. So where's the continuous revenue stream off of an install, if you will? And so there, at this point in time, it had to be our workflows and people-led data science, right, and data engineering and kind of um, monetization of that required that we had to look at where's all that data, what's the state of use, it's dirty, it's fragmented, has a lot of PII, it's not governed, right? So you're talking about you are now architecting the system from the very beginning. How do you take this asset and make it fluid enough to pipe data pipelines so that we can actually put the analytics piece? Everyone wants analytics. And what we tell people when they ask, why are you different than any other analytics platform? It's crowded in the data analytics when you're using agents just to show you visualized answers. The 80% before that, the grunt work of ingestion, of discovery, of governing, data engineering, those are the other 5 agents that we bring. Therefore, it's the end-to-end. So people in the enterprise want the analytics, but realize the state of the data is very cumbersome. You don't know from where to start, and you don't have all the tools. Along the way, the rise of the modern data stack is both, it's a double-edged sword. It's a blessing and a curse because the MDS, as rich as it is, it's so crowded that people do not know what do I actually need in the end for a tech stack, for my data stack, right? There's nuanced brands for every task in the data science space. Transformation is something, ETL is something else. You hear Databricks, and we heard warehouses, and we heard lake houses. And so if you go back to that enterprise, person that is not from this field, but they're the data consumer, they want to be able to extract out of it the insight. Which tools do I need? What's the industry standard? What's compliance here, right? And by the way, we do have a central data team that is over capacity, but it's happened in this last decade and a half as well. So the rise of the modern data stack with a lot of choice around a lot of nuanced steps. Number 2, the fact that even when you're hiring technical staff, if you can find them, they're a small percentage of the workforce in a company. So they're not able to support all of the requests, right, of all the different business units. Number three, the state of the data in itself for you to activate anything from it it's just how far have you been investing? How long ago have you been investing, right? And again, there's still, you think about energy and utilities. They have some data historically and very locked up homegrown systems. So just the infrastructure, and we actually heard this from one of our prospect utility companies, they are making investments in the infrastructure side, but it's going to be 5 to 7 years. And the question is, do we need to wait 5 or 7 years before we actually unlock the data, right? And this is where Brighthive comes in, is that we can actually help you with that layer while you're making the improvements in the infrastructure. Cloud technologies came as well, right? So the hesitancy wasn't there, but I think the frustration that you want the insights, you don't know from which angle to start. Usually we go through cycles of cost cutting, cost containment. So if you start something, you don't get really far, and then it gets frozen, typically because of spend. And then you're going into the cycle where every fiscal year, there's an intention to be more data informed and have the insights influence strategy. But is strategy really always informed from data? Right, and that's what I saw consistently as any enterprise that I worked in and being part of that team, especially since I'm a technologist, in a global kind of, central team. We had to work with the business units, get them to share their data. The other part of it too is that, people need to trust each other, even if we're in the same institution or in the same company, right? The data sharing problem is still a thing. So I would say the culture around it was the barrier always, right? But we're in a modern day, you don't expect to do it, with scissors and pencils, for example. You're expecting technology to show you a better path, create more fluidity, create velocity around that. It hasn't really taken off until now because of what the possibilities of AI. It's just something completely different. Having the internet doesn't mean that you solve this problem, right?
Right.
Um, and so I would say the enterprise clients we speak to and my, all these years, just what I carry in my mind and all these memories of being in these cultures feel very aligned around we've always wanted to be more data informed. We've always wanted to recommend to our leadership the right course of action for a new opportunity, or if it's, restructuring or whatever the case. We will invest and get as much as we can when it's mission critical, but our day-to-day work isn't consistently informed. And that's the nuance, I'm speaking about. Usually in the C-suite, you will invest to make sure before you make a major investment or a change, the data supports it. But why does that always just have to be in just a small part of the company, of the enterprise? Why not have, it's a work transformation actually argument, right? Why not have everyone in the organization start their work from understanding the data that they have, the data assets that they have within their function, and also that when you create that liberation, if you will, share it across the enterprise, right? That's why part of our name that we use is Brighthive. The hive represents an enterprise, and kind of activity in the hive is that every small team in a company or function that is unlocking insight, share it with the larger enterprise. And from there, you're changing that culture to be much more data informed and data mature because we all participate in it. Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned about this, 3% of the staff of these large organizations in the past, and is it maybe the same now, I guess,
Yeah.
being these data analysts? Yeah. Okay. Um, the question is like, how much of the organization, if there's only 3% of them, were they actually able to help with this data informed decisions? Like you were talking, the C-suite executives, if it's 3% of the organization and they have a tremendous amount of data, I'm thinking it's like the low, single digit percentages that they were actually able to support businesses have this data understanding. And then a secondary question to this is those, say, a department that would have their decisions based off of data, like how much benefit are they getting compared to previously?
The data consumers you're talking, or yeah. So, if you kind of step back for a minute here, Tableau, the rise of Tableau and the entire BI tool category. What that added to the culture is a lot of dashboards that are going to show something to me. But if you've been also keeping an eye on the culture around it, there's always skepticism if the dashboard is showing the most up-to-date data and the trust around the information that the dashboard shows. And then the life cycle, the workflow by which we get a dashboard updated, right? So the business unit has created a dashboard by the help of a central data fluent team. Now we need to change a field because we're not sure that was the right thing. Put a Jira ticket. What you ended up having in a lot of the places that we are selling into, you do have, 5 or 6 members of a team. 10 even if you're really, really, you have the deep pockets for it. But they're basically managing Jira tickets to update environments because they're the ones that are fluent in the Snowflake environment. They're the ones that are fluent in Databricks, not in the modeling, right? When you create a data model projecting into the future, working on more of the high human intelligence necessity to be able to crank more of the data, answer the questions, that is where we want our data, capacity of a man, woman, or whoever to really be owning, right? And they are really stuck doing the grunt work because the enterprise adopted all of these BI tools that are complicated for the average, business function employee. But you want to show your leadership a dashboard that shows a state of affairs on whatever the topic is. You don't control the data that's piping that. You don't, as someone, I'm sitting in the strategy team or I'm in the marketing and analytics, customer insights, if you're in consumer packaged goods, you're collecting the data. But the engine by which consistently unlocks the insight, which for us, we have a KPI, accelerate time to insight. That's one of the measures we have. This is what you're creating moving the gears around, right? And so they benefit in that how can we measure it? First of all, your job is much more delightful. I mean, this is something I'm going to tell every podcast and anyone I speak to or any, keynote I give. Let's start measuring delight in our jobs because we are going to all benefit when I increase the confidence in something I'm presenting and I can show the data and I actually can understand that data. And by the way, I used the tool and I was part of the insight creation. And so when that happens, right away by osmosis, you're starting to share insights versus not. Then you can measure that improvement and that gain because you're going to process more data, right? And you're creating a culture where if you have doubt in something like in a dashboard, look at yourself, right? Load your data assets on Brighthive. Turn on the connectors into Brighthive. Ask the agents. It's a conversational UI to 7 agents. Ask them what you need to know and let them visualize that answer for you. So the mechanism by which you can create the maximum impact puts these data consumers front and center, that they own the story and they own the journey from, I have 36 months worth of, Instacart sales data at the grocery store in this, region. I can create visualizations that can help us understand what happened to orange juice, right? Whatever it is that you want, right? And to some extent, we hear also things like everything's an Excel spreadsheet and it's too big that I'm not really sure the macros work all the time. I mean, these are statements from the data users and they're very simple to understand. You can actually identify with them because we lived in that culture before where we know we have a lot more than we can process, but we don't have the tools to process that data in a way that makes us much more informed and confident with the business decisions we're driving across the enterprise.
Right. And I think one of the things that you said there, which is getting me excited about this whole agentic age that we're moving into, but also what I keep hearing about, like other people that are just starting to hear about agents. It's like it's the natural aspect, the natural communication in which you're able to communicate with these things. They're you know, you said it so many times. These people that are working in these large organizations who don't have the technical know-how, whether they're frustrated or, I would assume also they're maybe a little bit afraid or hesitant or skeptical and sometimes about their own skills to be able to do this. Whereas now, whether we're talking about data or whether we're talking about, kind of anything within the AI agent age, is what you just have a normal conversation, whether it's via text box or you chat with it. And from that, you're able to get the benefits that you want, which I think is, I think more and more people are starting to understand that this is coming. And I think that's what is driving a little bit more excitement.
We don't expect to have a conversation with our data. We don't expect our data to have a conversation with us because it's intimidating us. It is, we know it's valuable, but how do I crack to that value? How do I get to it, right? It's like a coconut. How do I get to the good stuff in the middle, And there's a million ways you can try this coconut, but we know most of them fail except the one tool. And this is kind of very similar to what we're saying, why we're excited about the agents, is that they're giving us a new existence for data as a whole, right? That we no longer, and hence why I say, let's measure the feeling around our jobs and around, this age-old problem. Because the more I see it when people engage with our platform and they get really excited about what the agents are responding back with answers. Not only is it answering the answer for you, but it's telling you causation, correlation, why that is. And the human beings, our brain, that's what it wants. It wants high human intelligence reasons to understand and process that. I think everybody starts to feel elevated because now you can not only just say in my opinion, and supported by what I know.
Right.
What I know becomes crucial in this day and age because I can point to where I got my knowledge, right? My source of knowledge. And then I articulate an opinion. It's really going to be phenomenal to see how I think it's work transformation and future of work when everyone gets reskilled to use tools like this. In our case, we're very passionate about agentic AI for data management, data analysis. And you could be just as excited about agents for customer success and where's my package and all these. But in the end of the day, I don't fear it in any way because I do agree with the statement. It is going to change the world as we know it, and it's a better world. So these data consumers that we're passionate about, which are people that are in companies that, by the way, many of them in kind of bigger companies, they've been there for a while. So they're subject matter experts, whether it is in energy, financial services, whatever the industry is. Some wonderful people that have just been there all the time, and they've done the best that they could, right, with what they have. And so we look at the cultural of the enterprise and this idea of enterprise AI and is the enterprise ready? And we're seeing it change in 2023. Under 10% of the money that was spent to pilot AI actually made it into production in the enterprise. In 24, that number has increased. Now we're saying 25 is the year of agentic all over. The question is, which workflows? And of course, we argue for data workflow being one of the most important, not the only important one.
Right. Okay. So you had a couple key points and key terms in there about like fear. So when I was working in Europe, as we mentioned before the recording, one of the large European projects that I put together and was helping to manage was about bringing collaborative robots into manufacturing processes. Now, these are very specifically built robots to work with people, right? Like that, the whole term says collaborative robots. And yet every single organization that these were brought in, the whole staff was terrified that these things are going to take their jobs. There was there had to be obviously an education campaign, but there was no concept of this is going to augment my capabilities. It's here, it's going to take my job. Now, I think there might be a bit of a change in this whole new AI world that we're moving into, right? I'm sure you're familiar with the debate that's going on right now, whether we're going to need coders in the next 5 years or not, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even have a perspective on this, but I can assume that there's going to be some of these data analysts that are in the same seat as these manufacturing techs in the places that I was helping out. From everything that you're saying, it sounds like the data consumer in these organizations are going to be augmented with the powers of data analysts that they have now. What about the data analysts themselves? Like what's going to happen with these people?
There's always room
Yeah.
for innovation when you fix what's broken. You free up time, most important resource. Yes, money is there too, to focus on high, value, innovative, new ideas, new potential. What we want to see, what we're advocating for is that Julie, and Linda. Linda is a data scientist. Julie is in whichever functions you are in when you're listening to this podcast. And the goal is for Julie to approach Linda essentially at some parity, right? I've already been working with my data, Linda. Here's what I'm finding. Linda becomes more powerful for Julie because she's meeting her exactly where she's at as just a person that just works with data all the time in herself, that being Linda. They're both meeting at a better starting point because this kind of new world that we're advocating for, they can pick that up and figure out future data modeling or future investigation that goes above and beyond what Julie will know. And so when you look at the Brighthive platform, it has two paths. It is definitely going to do 80% of the grunt work of data so that Linda can focus on high value models and code, right? And that still needs a human brain, right? You can, AI is, you're going to tell it what you want it to do, is going to get good at it, and it's going to do it while you sleep. That gives human powers, right? It gives us, it increases our impact. I look at it as it's increasing Linda's impact. Because when Linda comes in the next day, she's not going to spend 6 hours of her day trying to figure out data connectors, trying to figure out the ingestion engine, trying to figure out all the transformations, right? These are all key. Anybody that's going to be listening to this is from the data space knows these terms. These are necessary steps for a quality data workflow in the enterprise that is, by the way, very risk averse and highly compliant. But everybody who has data wants to be careful with how they run that engine. And so the Brighthive platform, or any agentic solution that gets you to get all that grunt work, what's the impact of that? You free up. You free up the resources, which in this case, human potential and time, to work on innovation and new frontier. The problem today is that we can't imagine what that could be. What do you mean there's other things I have never thought about? What is that new world? Because human beings, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, by design, we overestimate the risk and underestimate the opportunity consistently. And therefore, a lot of people find it very hard to be an entrepreneur. What if, right? All the wrongs. But what if not only do we want all of that to happen agentically, right? So that we can focus on maybe solving one important problem that we haven't been able to crack, because I can focus on that, right? I have more insight. When these agents are working through massive data sets, it has a capacity that human beings just don't always, because we have to rejuvenate. We have to end the day. We have to go to sleep. We have to eat, right? We have to live. And the agents are going to not do all of that stuff, right? So they're going to get us to the answers faster. So what if the new world is about looking at new opportunities and innovation where all the data and the insights that's coming in is not just the responsibility of human beings? It's because agents are helping us go deeper and wider in the data assets that we have, right? Help us look at the quality and the instance of this data. A lot of data is very dirty, and therefore it is not usable, right? So do you want Linda to sit there and spend 2 years of her life just trying to get it usable? We have to be specific on what we're improving. And I think this is why the fear consists and is acute, because you cannot leave that answer to be to someone's, to like let someone to connect the dots. We have to be, as CEOs of AI companies, be very specific on where is the value generation that's happening, and paint a picture and ask the question, include the public in this, include people in what happens when all these 5 things are fixed, right? And take them into a world. We are not doing that as often. We should be, but I know, people are trying, because we're getting so excited about the possibility that we're forgetting you got to educate the market to capture it. They're just not going to continue to follow you as quickly as you would need them to. Yeah.
Okay.
This is about changing culture, not only about adoption.
Right. Okay. I do want to dive more into what you perceive of the future of all of this, which you've touched on a little bit, but I think, I also see the time is going down here a little bit. Maybe make the Brighthive platform a little bit more tangible for the listeners. Like you mentioned that there's 6 or 7 of these agents within Brighthive. Maybe I have the number off a little bit. In my mind, I'm seeing, do I have to talk to each of these agents individually, or do I talk to one and it communicates to all of them? So maybe clarify that, and maybe talk a little bit about the...
We have a main agent.
Yes.
Okay. Brightbot. Brightbot is the orchestration, like a maestro in an orchestra, right? And it has 6 agents underneath it.
Yeah.
And it orchestrates. So that in itself is an innovation for us, right? That it's not only one agent that we created that does the whole data workflow. We've created 6 agent with a maestro, if you will, that orchestrates all the specific tasks of the data workflow. The ingestion, just where is the data? I got to connect to it. So you're going to create the pipeline. So that in itself is an agent. That takes time in enterprises. We spend about 6 months with a new contract of just professional services to create connectors with our enterprise customers so that we can create their data pipelines. But today, this is getting automated completely by our agentic agent that is going to do ingestion. Then you bring in that data, you're going to do discovery. What state is it in, right? What's broken? Look at the schema. Look at the schema schema creation itself. Applying that, policing that as well for all the new data assets that come in. Then you have the governance agent, right? The governance agent is going to tell you where all the PII is and be able to give you mechanisms, and it actually applies the PII masking and controls and the policies. They're called data contracts for you in the data sets that you're working with, right? Becomes very important for data collaboration and sharing, because I have to trust that when the data leaves my walls, whatever company I'm in, we're vendors or we're in an ecosystem, that when you receive it, you're not going to do anything wrong or harmful. So therefore, I need a governance entity on top of this. Then you have the data engineering, right? An agent is going to be creating and looking at the engineering tasks. And then the data analytics agent, right? That then gives you that conversational, or whatever you're asking, it's going to show it in a visual format without you having to do the point and click like you would in a BI tool, right? It's a visualizer for you. That's what people think when we say agentic and data. They think that agent only. But for it to do what it needs all of the other 5 to work before it. And then our final agent, Brightbot Studio, when you do all of this, every AI company more or less is going to have a studio. And that's just basically giving you the ability to create an agent yourself without any code. And you create it. You give a definition. It's like giving it a name. My name is Suzanne. When I was born. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what you're going to look like. Here's what you're going to process. And you're going to take data like this one that I just cleansed and brought through the Brighthive platform. And it could be something like, this is a bot that's going to create my quarterly reports for my unit, for my division, right? And it knows what it's going to take, and it knows what it has to govern. So all of this happens because we created an agentic orchestration layer that knows which agents to call on and in what order and for which tasks, right? And orchestrates that in itself without the intervention of human beings, which is what happens in human life data teams.
Right.
What we've done is we've taken a highly specialized data team, and that's the very beginning of the company, understood why these people are different in their data specialization, understood their tasks, laid out the data workflow, understood all of that, and then started creating the agents that mimic human beings. Like, what's the threshold? What's the performance level? And started to essentially give them life, if you will, as if you were creating them from the same DNA of that specialization. That's the platform. That's why we say it's a data team in a box. It's not just one agent doing just the analytics. It's an entire data workflow in a box.
Super interesting.
Out on your cloud. So for those that are listening and considering, it is this agentic layer, this Brighthive is in your environment on your cloud. Nothing leaves your environment to come to us, which makes it even more powerful.
Right. Okay. Looking to the future a little bit, which is kind of the main point of the podcast as well.
Future tech.
Yeah. So you have a series of these agents working together. Is this because agents individually aren't powerful enough to do all of this as one agent? And do you see pick a timeline, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, you're only going to need one agent to do all of this because they're going to be powerful enough?
Maybe. We firmly believe right now with where the LLMs are and where this technology is, it's like, you have a trade. You're a really good carpenter because you're a really good carpenter, right? Maybe you can also do electrician's work and maybe some plumbing, but your mastery is in carpentry. That applies here. Because when you break up the tasks and give agents small tasks, it learns faster. And that is the cycle we want. Because if it does not deliver with high performance, then guess what? That change culture that we spend so much time talking about and the fear never goes away. So you are doing a service for everybody to ensure that you architect this in a way where the end result is higher trust in the performance and the outputs and the outcomes from these agents. Because if they get it wrong, right away, the skeptical is like, yep, knew it. It's not good, right? So right now, and I think for a while, because that is what people need to see happen, a high degree of certainty and a high degree of accuracy. And the fact that in this case, it's also logical that these are agents that are going to not get confused or hallucinate in great big ways because it's trying to do too much. And that we can, on our platform as well, you can evaluate that performance consistently, right? And be able to see. So there's quite a bit of guardrails. And if there's something that isn't working, you know exactly when to pinpoint. Just like, when you go to the doctor, there's a specific pain and that's what you're going to start. That is going to be it and be for a while. I think the idea that they all become one is really, we can't do this alone without the LLMs. I mean, the beauty about this entire world that we're in, it's not pinned on one thing. Like internet was the thing, and then it drove a lot of other innovation. But right now, they say that the tide, and all the boats have to go with the tide, right? We all have to rise together. And so that in itself, to me, I feel is one of those things where, as a community, whether you're open source or Agentic, or all the AI community, for each of us to focus, we don't have our own LLMs, but for each of us to focus on the part that we're very passionate about and evolve that and be part of the tide that's lifting all the boats, right? We're going to get to a point where does it make sense for humanity to have just a singular agent, right? That is the big question. I think we will. I absolutely do think so. I think the thing with AI is you can never say when, and that's what blew us out of the water in the last, 18 months is we didn't realize how quickly this is getting good. And therefore, that's when we launched all our agents last year. And in fact, we're just on the eve of another 2.0 launch when we realized before even they dubbed it the year of agents for 2025, we realized the reasoning and these are papers that are being published from big labs. You saw that within 7 months, if you're a betting person, it's highly likely that agents would do the job. And where we are today, it's exactly that.
Crazy. Yeah, this industry, I mean, this world, you could say, is moving very, very quickly. Politics aside. Okay, well, our time's almost up here. You've kind of touched on this as we've gone through, but kind of big picture, taking a big step back, like if we're focusing on organizations, going to really change, say, over the next couple of years, if they're going to be making their decisions based on like real hard data because they have these agentic teams? Are we going to see certain businesses, certain organizations just become, wildly efficient compared to others that aren't using these agentic data tools? This is something I've heard from many people. It's like there's going to be big winners and there's going to be big losers based on the amount of AI, whether it's agents or otherwise, that they're implementing or not. Is that how you're seeing?
Yeah, the CIO of the Mayo Clinic said in an event that I attended in November of 2024 at Insight for Insight Partners that doctors with AI are going to displace the doctors without, because he is getting a backlash from doctors. Because how did I go to medical school and take on all this debt and you're going to bring in AI? We are not trying to displace what human beings are really good at, which is innovation and highly skilled tasks. We've had to live in a world where we do a lot of mundane so that we can exist. We conform to exist. We're trying to argue that we're going to break away from that cycle, and that for that enterprise to change to the DNA is going to require that you measure things like how, daily, how many hours of the day are you actually using AI tools? Not just an afterthought or go into it once a week when you want or leave it at your discretion. Measure it as a function of someone's job, right? Let's redefine the job descriptions and say, this is what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing. How do you feel about that? And show them the way. We have to get to a minutia level of detail in change management. And that's why all AI companies that are selling to enterprise are starting to realize, us included, we don't just deploy the platform and walk away. We have a big part of our business, which is professional services. And you could say it's consulting. It's actually a lot of things, right? It's technical sales, it's customer success, it's change management. It is getting inside the DNA of these companies to figure out how do we create glue, brand new glue to get them, it's like connective tissue so that when one and part of the organization is working more with its data because we gave them a very powerful tool, that becomes, just very contagious everywhere else. And other people start to think about their data assets differently, and they begin to embrace, we deploy it enterprise-wide. So anyone in the enterprise can get on. Anybody can load their data. This is in your cloud, whatever company Acme, right? You can connect all your data assets. You can upload them, flat files, structured, unstructured. That's the beauty of Brighthive, is we start from a much wider kind of gateway than a lot of other just data management companies. And then we apply the entire user experience from an agentic point of view. And so the organizations that are really going to be wildly successful, as you said, are the ones that are going to then hold people accountable, responsible, and essentially invest in them. You're investing in the reskilling of people. It is a work transformation agenda, or it's a work transformation time. That's what I believe the CEO suite is looking at it that way. How do we create the systems that incentivize people to do that, so that we can replace the fear, right, with all the good feelings, if you will. I also believe that when we step back and look at our world and just on a personal scale, because so much of our work life bleeds into our, personal life, I think society as a whole is going to get used to expecting not to take things and confirm for, to exist, right? If I'm going to have a conversation for you about something I read, I'm going to have agentic AI in my phone, in my tablets, right, for me to fact check that. So that is the part that, where does the dance with society and professional lives kind of, essentially bleed in a positive way? It has a role, right? Because in the end, it's this, I am going between those two worlds all day long myself. And that will be the catalyst as well. Yeah.
Super. Well, I think that brings up a whole other discussion about, AI bias, and when you're fact checking, what kind of bias does your agent have? But I think that's for another time.
It's for another time, and that's why I'm saying this ecosystem is many players, and the tide has to lift all the boats. Everybody's has to work on improving their parts of it, compliance and safety and trust. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Suzanne, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Yeah, I feel like I could ask you another 20 questions. We could go on for another hour or so, but I want to be respectful of your time. I'll have your website up, which is going to be there's going to be a relaunch in a couple of days. So I guess when this episode airs, it'll be the new website. Your LinkedIn, are there any other places that you want people to reach out, follow what you're up to?
Absolutely. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm Suzanne at brighthive.io. I am very open. This is a very exciting time to be in. So I do want to hear from the community. I want to hear from people, what they think. What are they working on that they feel could contribute to this mission of ours? We all have to build together. And of course, just join our newsletter. We have a lot of content that comes out, including the podcast where I kind of explain it all. But we're here.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for the time and coming onto the podcast. It was very knowledgeable, especially as somebody who, as I said at the beginning, has worked, in startups, have my own startup, and in small businesses. So very, very interested for that.
It's not so good.
Thanks again. Bye. Well, thanks for listening to this week's Future Tech and Foresight podcast. If you like what you've heard here, there are, of course, a number of ways that you can support the podcast. The best way would be to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or give a rating on Spotify, which you can find a step-by-step explanation for on the futuretechandforesight.com website. Alternatively, feel free to leave a comment either on the episode show notes or the YouTube channel where you can see video recordings of the interviews. And finally, if you are part of an organization that is aware of the disruptive and transformational impact that emerging and future technologies will bring and want to know more, please get in touch to hear about the strategic foresight services that we offer and how we can help future-proof your organization and take advantage of the phenomenal opportunities available to survive and thrive in the future.
A lot of future-shocked people and future-shocked institutions in our society are simply overwhelmed.
Once there is superintelligence, the fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does.
Science fact is catching up to science fiction.
The first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity needs to make.
The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Within a 10-year design revolution, we can have all humanity living the highest standard of living anybody's ever known.
Progress is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it's going to reach a point where progress is so fast it's going to be a singularity.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
Every single headline points to the birth pangs of a Type 1 civilization.